Hey guys, tonight we're going further back than we've ever gone before, back to a time before history even had a name. You're going to drift through a world where myth and memory are the same thing, where the stars were gods, and the gods walked among rivers of clay. We're talking about the Anunnaki, the ancient sky beings said to have shaped humanity, ruled over kings and then vanished, leaving only stone tablets and 1,000 unanswered questions behind. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing the constellation of viewers forming around the world each night. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You open your eyes to a landscape of endless mud and light. The air hums with insects, and the twin rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates, spill through the plain like veins beneath a skin of dust. It's around 5,000 years before the world you know, and civilization is still blinking its way out of the dark. You're in Sumer, the land between rivers, where gods are not prayed to but expected to arrive, shimmering and impatient from the horizon. The ground itself feels alive here. You can almost sense something moving beneath it, something ancient and intelligent. The air smells of reeds and wet earth, of fires burning animal fat as offerings. The first cities are rising: Eridu, Uruk, Nippur, each one a cluster of mud brick houses wrapped around a ziggurat, a stairway to the heavens, built not for tourists but for descent. Because here the divine does not hover, it lands. They call them the Anunnaki, those who came from the sky, but to the people watching from the ground, they're not abstract symbols, they are tangible. They stride across the floodplains in shining garments, faces hidden behind gold and lapis masks, eyes like the reflection of sunlight on water. They are many, and they are not all merciful. The scribes will later write that these beings divided the world, some to the heavens, some to the earth, some to the underworld, and that their quarrels echoed through the air like thunder. But for now, what you hear is only the distant murmur of priests reciting hymns in the language of the gods, a language of vibration and breath. You stand near one of the first temples, a simple altar built from sun-dried bricks, offerings of barley, fish, and sweet beer ferment in clay bowls. A priest in a linen robe lifts his hands toward the sky, muttering words older than memory. Somewhere above, the wind shifts and the people kneel. They've seen something, maybe lightning, maybe a glint of metal in the clouds. To them there's no difference. Every flicker from the heavens is divine. You feel it too, that electric thrum crawling across your skin, the ancient conviction that someone is watching from beyond the horizon. Over time, these moments become stories, and those stories become lore. The Anunnaki are said to have built the order of the world itself. They assigned the duties of the universe, one to oversee the waters, one to guard the winds, another to measure fate itself with a stylus pressed into clay. Indil, lord of the air, storms, and authority, is said to have separated heaven and earth, commanding the boundaries of life and death. Enki, god of wisdom, shaped mankind out of mud and divine blood, not as a gift, but as a convenience. Humans were created to serve, to feed, build, and worship, to give voice to the silence between the gods. In the myths, Enki kneels beside a riverbank, his hands wet with clay, murmuring words that make matter tremble. From that mixture of earth and divine essence, humanity is born, fragile, breathing, confused. When the first humans stand blinking in the sunlight, the gods laugh. They've made servants, gardeners, laborers, but they've also made thinkers, and thinkers are dangerous. You can almost see it, the first man staring up at the ziggurat, wondering not just how the gods made him, but why. That question will echo for millennia. As night falls over ancient Sumer, the ziggurats glow with oil lamps. The stars above mirror the cities below, an endless reflection of heaven on earth. The priests say that the Anunnaki descend at night, their ships gleaming like fireflies to feast upon the offerings. Whether that means actual beings or the slow exchange of energy between worshipper and deity doesn't really matter. What matters is belief, the rhythm of people looking up and whispering gratitude into the dark. The air is heavy with incense. The temples hum with quiet devotion. Civilization itself is learning how to dream. You walk through the streets of Uruk, the first great city, and every wall is covered in the marks of reeds pressed into clay, cuneiform, the writing of gods and men. There are lists of Bali, poems of kings, hymns to Inanna, the Queen of Heaven, and stories of her descent into the underworld, where 7 gates strip her of power and pride until she stands naked before her sister, Ereshkigal. It's in these stories that you begin to glimpse something human inside the divine. The Anunnaki are not omnipotent. They fight, they envy, they grieve. They mirror the people who imagine them. Perhaps that's the secret. The gods are the first mirrors we ever built. One of the oldest tablets tells of how the gods grew weary of toil. They worked the canals and fields themselves before humans existed. When they rebelled, Enki proposed a solution: create a race to bear the burden. The mixture of clay and divine blood would do the work in their place. You can almost hear the laughter around the celestial council, the same laughter that will echo thousands of years later, whenever power creates servitude. The humans, newly made, dig, harvest, and worship. They raise cities for beings they'll never touch. The relationship is transactional, but beneath it, there's awe. The people see the gods not just as masters, but as proof that the universe has structure, purpose, maybe even affection. In the distance, thunder rolls across the flatlands. The Tigris overflows and villagers rush to secure their homes. Floods are common, but every flood feels like judgment. The priests record it in their tablets. The gods were displeased. You watch the water climb the walls of the temple, see offerings float away like lost prayers. When it recedes, survivors rebuild. Each time the cities rise stronger. Each time the stories of the Anunnaki grow more elaborate. They become less like weather and more like destiny. By the time you reach Eridu, the oldest of them all, the myths have hardened into theology. The temple stands on layers of older temples, each one built directly on top of the last, like a staircase through time. The priests chant the names of the gods with rhythmic precision. Enlil, Enki, Ninisag, Inanna, Utu, Nana, names that sound like thunder when spoken together. Somewhere beneath your feet, the clay tablets are drying in the sun, preserving every word, every hymn, every instruction for the next 1,000 years. The gods will change names, merge with others, cross borders into Akkad and Babylon, but their roots are here, in this river mud and heat haze. You wander along a canal at dusk and you can't help but feel small. The water glimmers like molten gold, and in it, the reflection of the ziggurat flickers with the first stars. Someone beside you whispers that those lights in the sky are not stars at all, but the watchful eyes of the Anunnaki. They believe the gods are still up there, observing, deciding which fields will flood and which will flourish. You realize how human that belief is, the desire to be seen, to be known, to matter in the gaze of something vast. Night deepens. A breeze rolls in from the desert, carrying the scent of burnt resin and distant storms. The city quiets. Somewhere a baby cries and a dog barks at nothing. You lie back on the cool stone beside the temple stairs, staring at the endless black above. The stars shimmer, ancient and indifferent, but for a moment you think you see one move, a streak of light cutting silently across the heavens. Maybe it's just a meteor, or maybe, if the old stories still breathe in the dust, it's an Anunnaki returning home. And as your eyelids grow heavier, you begin to understand what those first Sumerians must have felt. Not fear, but wonder. The sense that the universe isn't empty, that maybe we were shaped with intention, or maybe, just maybe, we invented that intention ourselves, to feel less alone under an ancient, endless sky. You wake again in the same world, but centuries later, when Sumer's mud has hardened into empire, and the Anunnaki have become not just spirits of myth, but the architecture of belief itself. The rivers still glitter through the plain, carrying silt and secrets, but now their banks are crowded with temples, marketplaces, and walls etched with hymns to invisible kings. The air smells of roasted grain and goat fat. The smoke rising from the ziggurats is said to feed the gods themselves. It's dawn, and the priests are already chanting. Each syllable is a code, a vibration calling the old sky down to earth. You can hear the cadence echo through the alleys, the divine bureaucracy of the heavens being reenacted by human voices. In this age, the Anunnaki are no longer simply beings of storm and starlight. They have become a royal council, a cosmic administration, 7 great gods, each presiding over fate, justice, water, air, wisdom, and the mysteries of life and death. They are both terrifying and comfortingly predictable, like rulers you can bribe with incense. You can almost see them hovering above the city in your mind, radiant forms of gold and shadow, their faces human but too symmetrical, their movements too deliberate. When the priests speak their names, people bow, not because they fear punishment, but because the idea of order itself feels sacred. You drift toward the great temple of Enlil, where offerings pile in clay basins like a city's worth of gratitude. The head priest, skin glistening with oil, raises a bowl of beer and whispers a prayer to the wind. Somewhere above, the clouds answer with a low rumble. The people gasp. They believe the god himself has accepted the gift, and in a sense he has. Thunder is the oldest applause in history. Every storm is an affirmation that the heavens are listening. By mid-morning, the sun beats down, turning the streets into channels of light. You pass a group of artisans carving tablets, accountants of the divine. Their fingers press neat wedges into the clay, recording debts, rations, and dreams. Each transaction begins with a small drawing of a god's symbol. Even economics is an act of faith here. The Anunnaki are present in everything. In the price of barley, the flow of water, the birth of a child. If a harvest fails, people whisper that Enki has turned away. If the rain comes too early, Enlil is angry again. It's exhausting, but also deeply intimate. This world where every gust of wind feels personal. At the temple's top terrace, incense burns in copper bowls. The smoke curls upward, carrying prayers that will rise, cool, and eventually fall as rain. Beside you, an elderly scribe tells a story written in the oldest tongue, how the Anunnaki once walked openly among men, teaching them the arts of irrigation and architecture. They gave us the measure of heaven, he says, and we repaid them with bricks. You glance down at the streets below, where thousands of those bricks form perfect lines, each one stamped with a king's name. Civilization, he implies, is nothing more than a monument to divine collaboration. But the gods who came to rule are also jealous. The myths say that the younger gods, the Ajiji, once served the Anunnaki as laborers, digging rivers and raising mountains for them. Eventually they rebelled, weary of toil, and demanded rest. In that moment, the Anunnaki created mankind, a species designed to inherit the burden. And so the cycle began again. You can imagine it. The old celestial council debating, their voices like the wind through bronze doors, agreeing to build a creature that could work, worship, and weep on their behalf. Humans, the ultimate outsourcing project. As dusk settles, the ziggurat blazes with oil lamps, each flame a small imitation of the stars above. The priests begin the evening hymn, the sound deep and resonant, like the earth itself breathing. You feel the vibration in your ribs. People kneel, pressing their foreheads to the ground, murmuring thanks for the harvest, for survival, for the illusion that their suffering has purpose. One young farmer lifts his head and stares upward, his eyes glassy with awe. He has never seen the ocean, never seen beyond the borders of his village, but he believes with absolute certainty that gods once walked where he now kneels. And maybe they did. Maybe those gods were simply humans who learned too much too early, astronomers who could read the planets, engineers who mastered irrigation, or kings who cultivated the illusion of divinity so thoroughly that their descendants believed it. Or maybe, as the myths insist, they were something else entirely, not born of this earth but bound to it by curiosity or exile. You can almost hear the hum of distant machinery in the sky, a faint metallic drone that could be thunder or could be the echo of something descending. The beauty of these stories is that they don't insist on proof. They thrive in ambiguity. The Anunnaki are both real and metaphorical, physical and cosmic. They represent the moment humanity looked upward and decided the stars were watching back, the moment when curiosity became religion, and religion became civilization, and whether they truly descended or were conjured by imagination, their influence shaped everything that followed: our hierarchies, our moral codes, our endless longing to return to the sky. As night deepens, the heat fades from the stones. You can smell rain coming, sharp, metallic, cleansing. In the distance, lightning flickers over the river, illuminating the silhouettes of ziggurats and palms. For an instant, the city glows gold, every rooftop glimmering like the surface of a coin. The people whisper that the Anunnaki are passing overhead, checking on their creation. You tilt your face upward and close your eyes, half expecting to feel a hand of light touch your forehead, to hear a voice like thunder say that you were made well. But only the wind answers, warm and ancient, carrying dust from the deserts of time. You lie back again beside the temple stairs, the same spot where generations of dreamers have watched the stars before you. The sky seems impossibly vast, and you wonder if somewhere, above all that darkness, the beings who taught us to build and believe are still watching, or if they too have forgotten what they were looking for. The night fades into a slow grey dawn, and you wake to the sound of rain dripping from the clay rooftops. The rivers have flooded again, spreading a thin layer of silver water across the fields, turning the land into a mirror. The Sumerians will say this is a blessing from Enki, who rules the deep waters and the hidden wisdom beneath them. In this new light, everything looks like the reflection of something else, as if the entire world is a copy of a higher design drawn somewhere beyond the clouds. You stretch and walk toward the ziggurat's edge, and below you the people of the city are already stirring, barefoot in the mud, gathering reeds, patching roofs, whispering small prayers of thanks. No one dares to complain. To question the flood is to question the will of the Anunnaki, and that's not something you do out loud. In the temples, scribes have begun carving new stories into wet clay. These are not the histories we know. They're a strange mix of fact, fear, and metaphor, woven together like strands of riverweed. You find one being recited aloud by a priest who looks more like a scholar than a mystic. He tells of the first humans born from clay and the blood of a god named Kingu, who was sacrificed to give them spirit. Enki, he says, mixed the blood with earth, whispering into it until it rose and spoke. The priest describes how the newborn humans stood trembling, confused, their skin slick with divine essence. The gods watched, amazed by their own handiwork, but already uneasy because in their faces they saw reflection, not servitude. They were made to serve, the priest says, but they began to wonder. It's hard not to feel sympathy for them. You imagine the first of your kind looking up at the sky, realizing it isn't just ceiling, it's destination. Maybe that was the real rebellion, not the kind that needed swords, but the kind that asked questions. Why were we made? What do the gods need from us that they cannot do themselves? And in that wondering, humanity became something new, not just clay that breathes, but clay that thinks. As centuries pass, the relationship between gods and mortals grows complicated. The Anunnaki expect obedience, offerings, devotion, but humans learn to bargain. Every prayer becomes a negotiation. You can feel that tension building in the air, like static before a storm. In one story, a farmer refuses to make his offering, claiming he's too poor to feed both his children and the gods. That night, his field is struck by lightning. The message is clear, but in another story, a cunning shepherd offers music instead of grain, and the gods, charmed, double his flock. Even divinity, it seems, can be persuaded by beauty. You smile at that thought, the idea that art might be older than fear. By now, the names of the gods have multiplied. Each city claims its own patrons, its own version of the cosmic family tree. There's Nin-Nersarg, the mother goddess who shapes the mountains, and Utu, the shining sun who judges the deeds of men. And then there's Inanna, radiant, reckless, the goddess of love, war, and everything in between. Her temples hum with life. Musicians, priests, and dancers move like wind through silk. They say she descends into the underworld every year to rescue her lover, Dumuzi, a ritual that mirrors the dying and rebirth of the seasons. You stand outside her shrine as a festival begins, drums pounding, flutes wailing, the smell of beer and incense blending in the humid air. This is not a religion of quiet kneeling. It's one of ecstatic celebration. The people dance for their gods, as if to remind them that humans can create joy out of nothing. The rain stops, and the sky clears into a soft blue. Somewhere on the horizon, a caravan of traders glitters in the distance, bringing lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, and copper from Oman. These goods, they believe, are gifts the gods sent from faraway lands. Each trade route is a vein through which belief travels, carrying the idea of the Anunnaki to every corner of Mesopotamia and beyond. Soon their names will echo in Akkad, in Babylon, in Assyria. Each culture will reshape them, but the core remains, beings from the sky who built, ruled, and departed. You find yourself standing before a tablet half buried in sand. The inscription tells of a time when the Anunnaki grew tired of the noise of humankind. The people multiplied, built cities, and filled the earth with chatter and song. Their clamor kept the gods from sleeping, the text says. So Endel decided to silence them. He sent plagues, drought, famine, a test to thin the herd. You can almost hear the wind whistle between the words. The tablet cracks at the corner, as if time itself wants to interrupt the story, but it continues. Enki, the god of wisdom and compassion, defied the council. He warned a man named Atrahasis, telling him to build a boat and gather life within it. You know this story. It will survive thousands of years and become the flood of Noah, the ark, the dove, the olive branch. But here it's older, stranger, and more tragic, because the flood isn't punishment for sin. It's frustration. The gods made humanity, then regretted the noise of our existence. When the flood comes, it's not rain at first. It's mist, then wind, then the sky opening like a cracked pot. The rivers rise, swallowing temples, walls, and ziggurats. The cries of men blend with the roar of water until everything becomes one endless sound. A reminder that creation and destruction are the same art form. You watch the city vanish beneath the waves. Only the tops of the tallest towers remain, glinting briefly before the surface smooths over. The gods, watching from above, are silent. Maybe they are ashamed, maybe they are relieved. But the story doesn't end with silence. It ends with mercy. Enki intervenes again, calming the waters, guiding Atrahasis to rest on a mountain. The survivors emerge, trembling, clutching fragments of the old world. They build fires, make offerings, and the smoke curls upward like forgiveness. The gods inhale, satisfied. They promise never to destroy mankind again, though they'll keep finding smaller ways to test us. The rainbow of later myths doesn't appear here, but you can almost feel it, hidden behind the clouds. A covenant older than hope we will serve, and they will remember. You wander through the aftermath. The air smells of wet clay and ash. The survivors carve their gratitude into new tablets, and once again the cycle begins. Creation, rebellion, punishment, renewal. Humanity keeps living, loving, building, and doubting, as if testing the patience of the sky itself. Somewhere far above, the Anunnaki drift into legend. Maybe they return to their celestial halls, watching their creation from afar. Maybe they dissolve into symbols, their names becoming syllables in prayers that no longer know their origin. The flood recedes, but its memory never does. It lingers in every religion that will follow, each one a reflection of this first divine experiment, flawed, tender, terrifying. You breathe the damp air and feel the weight of that legacy. The world has been washed clean, but the question remains, if we were made to serve the gods, who are we now that they've gone quiet? The sky over Sumer has turned to bronze, heat ripples across the horizon, and the sound of hammers echoes through the city of Ur. You can smell metal, sweat, and baked clay, the scent of a civilization that's learning to outlast its gods. The flood is now only a story told by elders in hushed tones, but its echo remains in every ritual, every festival, every whispered prayer at night. The temples have grown taller, the kings more ambitious. The people no longer wait for gods to descend. They've begun to build their own heavens, one brick at a time. You walk through the temple quarter, and everywhere you look there are eyes, carved into walls, pressed into pottery, painted on idols of lapis and copper. The Anunnaki are watching, always watching, or so the priests remind everyone. But something subtle has shifted. The gods who once ruled directly now speak only through their chosen intermediaries, priests, kings, diviners, people who claim to translate thunder into law. Civilization has bureaucratized belief. You can feel it in the rhythm of the city, incense smoke rising with the same regularity as taxes. Inside the great ziggurat, the air is cool and dim. Light filters down through narrow shafts, painting gold stripes on the walls. A procession is moving, priests in linen robes carrying baskets of grain and amphorae of oil. They place them before a gilded statue of Enlil, the great lord of air, whose sculpted eyes seem to follow every motion. A scribe chants the king's titles, his voice echoing against the stone, chosen by the gods, shadow of heaven, shepherd of men. The king stands nearby, head bowed, but his expression isn't reverent, it's calculating. You can almost see the thought behind his eyes. If I speak for the gods, then I am the gods. This is how power changes shape. Not with rebellion, but with ritual. The Anunnaki, once the masters, have become symbols, and humans have learned to wear their imagery like armor. The ziggurat becomes not just a stairway for gods to descend, but for kings to ascend. You watch one of them, a young ruler named Nammu, climb the steep steps at dawn. He pauses halfway, the city stretching below him like a mosaic of mud and light. When he reaches the top, he kneels, raises his hands to the sky, and declares that the gods have given him authority over all creation. The crowd below cheers, and in that roar you hear the quiet death of divine independence. The gods no longer rule us. We rule through them. The scribes record everything. On tablets of wet clay they inscribe not just laws but divine mandates, measurements for temples, formulas for rituals, instructions for pleasing the unseen. They list punishments for disrespect, rewards for devotion, tariffs for grain, even the price of a bride. Every detail of human life becomes part of the same cosmic ledger. It's religion as mathematics, belief quantified into bureaucracy, and yet, beneath that order, there's unease. The older myths of floods, rebellions, and vanished gods whisper in the background like unfinished sentences. You pass through a marketplace where women sell bundles of herbs said to cure infertility, and men carve protective amulets shaped like tiny winged beings. One merchant offers you a charm engraved with the symbol of Enki, twin streams winding like serpents. It keeps the bad dreams away, he says, and you realize he's not just selling protection, he's selling memory. The gods may have receded, but their language still clings to every object, every superstition. Even a piece of pottery carries a trace of divinity, if you believe hard enough. By dusk, the city glows amber in the fading sun. The ziggurat's shadow stretches across the plain like a dark pyramid of silence. Inside, a ritual is beginning. You hear the deep rhythm of drums, slow and hypnotic. A young girl, chosen for purity, is led up the temple stairs carrying a silver bowl. At the summit, she offers it to the statue of Inanna, Queen of Heaven, Goddess of Love and War. The air thickens with incense. Somewhere a priest begins to sing in a language older than writing, each note trembling like the memory of thunder. They say Inanna's spirit enters the girl in moments like this. You watch her eyes glaze over, her voice shifting into something deeper, almost mechanical. She speaks words no one fully understands. The priests listen, nodding solemnly. They'll record these words on tablets before dawn, interpreting them as divine instruction. But you know what you've seen. The possession isn't celestial, it's human. An act of longing so intense it transcends sanity. She's not channeling the goddess. She's becoming what every believer craves, a momentary vessel for meaning. You step back into the night. The moon rises over the desert, huge and pale, its craters glinting like forgotten cities. Somewhere, a lion roars. The air tastes of salt and dust. You think about the gods, where they might be now, whether they ever were at all. Maybe they didn't vanish. Maybe they dissolved into the people who invented them. Every temple brick, every priestly chant, every breath drawn in awe, it's all evidence of something larger than logic. You look up at the stars and wonder if the Anunnaki are up there still, waiting for us to remember them, or if they've moved on, leaving us to mimic their creation in our own small, flawed ways. As you walk back through the silent streets, you notice a mural painted on a temple wall. It shows the Anunnaki descending from the heavens, wings spread, helmets gleaming, light radiating from their bodies. Below them, humans kneel in fear and adoration, but someone, perhaps centuries later, has carved a small addition into the scene, a single human figure standing, not bowing, staring directly at the gods. The face is crude, but the message is clear. Somewhere along the way, humanity learned to look its creators in the eye. You stop before the mural, and imagine that first moment of defiance, the whisper of self-awareness rising through the noise of worship. Maybe that was the true birth of civilization, not the invention of writing or the building of cities, but the instant someone realized the gods might need us just as much as we needed them. The realization that divinity and humanity are mirror images, locked in an endless reflection, each shaping the other's meaning. The night deepens. The wind carries the faint smell of the river, cool and metallic. You close your eyes and listen. Somewhere in the rhythm of the waves you can almost hear them, not the roar of gods, but the heartbeat of a species that refuses to stop asking questions. You wake to thunder, the kind that doesn't just rumble. It rolls through the bones of the city, shaking loose bits of plaster and dust from the temple ceilings. The rain has not yet come, but the air feels swollen with it, electric, ready to burst. Somewhere, a bell clangs, summoning the priests to the ziggurat. You follow the sound through streets slick with humidity until you reach the towering steps of Nipper's great temple. Today isn't like other days. Today is the festival of judgment, the day when Enlil and Enki, the Sky Father and the Water Lord, settle their dispute about who truly rules creation. The story is older than the walls around you, older even than the language that carries it. Yet every year, the city reenacts it, like a play whose ending no one dares to change. The priests stand in two groups, those of Enlil robed in white, those of Enki draped in blue. Their chants rise in overlapping rhythms, one deep and thundering, the other low and fluid, like opposing tides. The people crowd around the base of the ziggurat, clutching charms and garlands, knowing that this is more than theatre. The verdict of the gods determines the fate of the harvest, the floods and the winds for the coming year. You watch as the king ascends the stairs barefoot, the hem of his robe dragging through the dust. He pauses halfway, raising his hands to the sky, and for a moment lightning flashes behind him, silhouetting his body in silver. It feels staged, yet you can't help but feel the awe ripple through the crowd. The story begins with a quarrel in the heavens. and now proud and severe, claims dominion over the sky and the laws that govern it. Enki, clever and mischievous, argues that all life begins in water, and therefore the world belongs to him. The Anunnaki Council watches. Divided, their debates are not metaphorical, they are weather. When Enlil speaks, the wind howls. When Enki answers, the rivers swell. The people below can feel the tension in their lungs. For them, theology isn't philosophy, it's survival. The gods' arguments decide whether the fields will drown or bloom. As the chanting intensifies, thunder cracks directly above. The king's voice joins the storm, reciting the verdict written long ago. Both sky and sea are sacred, but balance belongs to neither. It belongs to wisdom. The crowd exhales as rain finally breaks across the plains, heavy and warm, soaking everyone at once. The priests lift their arms in triumph. Enki's waters have returned, but only because Enlil allowed them. You can almost hear the smugness in the thunder. The people don't mind. They tilt their faces to the rain, laughing, drinking, alive again. For another year the argument in the sky is settled. When the storm fades, the city glows, muddy streets turn to mirrors, torches reflecting in puddles. You walk through the aftermath, watching people leave offerings at doorways, bits of bread, bowls of beer, feathers, petals, anything to keep the gods pleased. But you can sense a quiet fatigue in them. The rituals are beginning to feel endless. For generations their ancestors built temples, fed statues, whispered prayers into the air, and yet the floods still come, the crops still fail, and the stars remain silent. The Anunnaki's silence is no longer majestic, it's unnerving. You find yourself beside a group of scribes seated under an awning, sheltering their tablets from the drizzle. They're arguing, voices sharp and nervous. If the gods control everything, one says, then why do they contradict themselves? Another replies, perhaps they've grown distant. Perhaps we were meant to rule ourselves. They fall quiet at that, glancing around as if the walls themselves might be listening. Heresy, in this age, doesn't require disbelief, only doubt. But the seed has been planted. In the temples, that same doubt begins to seep upward, slow but unstoppable. Priests reinterpret the old stories. Enlil becomes less of a father and more of a concept. The wind, the voice of order. Enki becomes wisdom itself, not a being but a principle. You can feel the shift happening, myth turning into philosophy, gods dissolving into ideas. Yet even as belief evolves, nostalgia clings to the people like humidity. They miss the age when the sky felt personal, when thunder had a name. At dusk you wander outside the city walls, where the fields stretch toward the fading horizon. The air still carries the scent of wet clay. A lone shepherd tends his flock near the edge of a canal. He nods to you, then points toward the horizon, where lightning flashes faintly in the distance. They're fighting again, he says with a grin, as if speaking of old friends who never learned to get along. You look where he's pointing, and imagine Enlil and Enki wrestling across the clouds, one made of storm, the other of tide, each certain the world was meant for him. The shepherd chuckles softly. They sound tired, he adds. You nod, so do we all. By nightfall, the storm is gone. The stars return, sharp and cold. The rivers murmur like voices beneath the ground. Somewhere deep in the temple, a priest finishes writing the last line of the day's tablet. The gods have spoken. Their will is balance. But you can't help wondering if he wrote that out of faith or out of habit. You lie in the grass by the riverbank, watching the moon ripple on the water's surface. For a brief moment, it looks like an eye staring back. You think of Enki's wisdom and Enlil's fury, of their eternal argument and what it mirrors in us, the struggle between control and chaos, intellect and instinct. Maybe the gods didn't invent those forces at all. Maybe they were reflections of what already existed in the clay they shaped us from. The night insects begin to sing, a low drone that sounds almost like the humming of distant machines. You close your eyes and imagine that somewhere far above, the Anunnaki are still watching, their voices carried through lightning and rain, arguing about a creation that no longer needs them but still dreams of their return. The sound of water never leaves you, even now, centuries later, when the rivers have shifted course and the gods who once governed them are names etched into fading clay. That rhythm still lingers in the air, the steady pulse of the flood that once erased the world. You stand at the edge of a plain now dry and cracked, where the ghosts of ancient canals glint under the morning sun. The farmers of this new age call it the land of Shurupak, but its bones remember the flood. Its soil is layered with salt and story. You bend down and touch the earth. It feels soft, fragile, the texture of memory itself. Somewhere beneath your feet lies the city that drowned and rose again. Its bricks dissolved and reformed so many times that even the worms must be tired of rebuilding it. The flood isn't myth here. It's a scar. Every time the sky darkens, the people still glance upward, as if expecting the sea to come marching over the horizon again. Every temple that rises here carries an unspoken prayer, not again, please not again. In this reborn world, the gods are quieter. The Anunnaki still exist, but they no longer stride through the fields of men. They've grown remote, their names repeated in songs like lullabies meant to calm the night. Instead, they rule through kings, chosen men, or perhaps just ambitious ones, who wear divinity like a crown. You find yourself in one of those new cities, Babylon, a name that will outlive the people who speak it. It's a world of order now. Every brick is marked with a king's seal. Every tablet begins with the phrase by the command of the gods. You can almost hear the irony in the scribe's voice as he writes it. The ziggurats are taller now, gleaming with baked brick and bitumen. Their tops pierce the clouds, literal mountains of worship. The people say they were designed as stairways so the gods could descend again, but you suspect they're more like monuments to human longing. You walk through a courtyard where slaves carry baskets of earth, building yet another level. Their skin glistens in the heat. The air smells of pitch and labor. When they pause to drink, one of them laughs bitterly. If the gods wanted to visit, he says, they'd have done it by now. You almost expect lightning to strike him for that. But nothing happens. The sky remains still, as if agreeing in silence. In the palace, a priest reads from a tablet describing the flood of the Anunnaki. His voice trembles as he recounts how Enlil grew furious with humankind, how Enki disobeyed the divine counsel to save Atrahasis, how the floodwaters swallowed the world and left only one boat drifting among the mountains. But this time, the story feels different. Less warning, more allegory. The flood isn't just a punishment, it's a reset, a divine reminder that creation can start over whenever it pleases. The gods weep for their mistake. The priest reads softly. They made man and man became echo. You watch the courtiers nod solemnly, pretending to understand. Outside, the Tigris has turned golden under the setting sun. Fishermen cast nets that glimmer like spiderwebs. The air smells of salt and wet reeds. It's beautiful, but you can sense the anxiety beneath it, the constant waiting for the water to rise again. The priests claim that every few generations the gods send a storm to test humanity's humility. The people have learned to respond with ceremonies instead of panic. When thunder rolls, they kneel, burn incense, and whisper apologies into the wind. Some even build small boats and set them adrift, filled with offerings of grain and honey, little arks of atonement. You watch one float away, candlelight trembling on its surface, and can't help wondering if this is devotion or just trauma passed down through millennia. By midnight, the city has fallen quiet. You climb to the top of a half-finished ziggurat and look out at the plain below. The moon paints the canals silver, and for a moment the entire world looks submerged again. The thought sends a chill down your spine. Somewhere deep within your memory, or maybe the world's memory, you still hear the roar of that ancient water, the voice that once silenced everything. Maybe that's what the flood really was, the sound of the universe clearing its throat. You sit on the edge of the temple wall, legs dangling into darkness, and imagine what it must have been like to be a god in that storm, to look down at the fragile clay creatures you made, breaking and floating away, and to realize that your own hands were responsible. The myths never say whether Enlil regretted it. They only say that after the flood, the gods gathered like frightened children, starving because no humans were left to feed them with offerings. When they found Atrahasis, alive and burning incense, they swarmed like flies around the smoke. Even divinity, it seems, is hungry for attention. A gust of wind brushes your face. It smells faintly of rain, or maybe memory again, the same thing in this land. You look up at the stars. The ancients believed each one was an Anunnaki who had returned to the heavens, shining as a reminder that balance was restored. You wonder if they still look down on this world, watching how their creation learned to build cities, measure time, and craft stories that made gods unnecessary. Maybe that's the reason they never came back. Maybe they realized we no longer needed rescuing, or maybe we never needed them at all. Far below, the river sighs. You lie back on the warm stone, eyes half closed, and the night hums around you. The insects sing the same rhythm the priests once chanted. The water moves through the channels like veins beneath the earth. Everything is alive again, and everything feels temporary. You imagine the flood returning, not as punishment this time, but as release. The gods dissolving into the sea, the kings into dust, and you floating weightless between them, part of both the creation and the undoing. The wind picks up, and for an instant you think you hear a voice within it. Low, distant, almost regretful. It might be thunder, or it might be the last whisper of the Anunnaki, fading like breath over water. We made you so you would remember us. Morning comes softly, bleeding through the mist that hangs over the plains of Akkad. The rivers shimmer like quicksilver veins, feeding fields that stretch endlessly toward the horizon. Civilization has matured, or, depending on how you look at it, learned to perform control. The kings now wear divinity the way others wear perfume, not because they are gods, but because they want to be smelled as such. Every decree begins with a divine invocation, every victory inscribed with a celestial signature. Yet beneath the splendor you can sense exhaustion. The Anunnaki have grown quiet, and humanity has grown loud enough to fill the silence. You walk through Babylon at dawn. The city hums like a living engine, gears of prayer and commerce grinding together. Market stalls open, priests sweep temple courtyards, scribes dip their styluses in ink made from soot and vinegar. Above it all, the great ziggurat of Anunnaki cuts into the sky, the house of the foundation of heaven and earth. It's said the Anunnaki themselves advised its design, a stairway bridging the mortal and the divine. But when you look at it now, with the sun gilding its edges, it feels less like a divine invitation and more like a human challenge, a declaration that if the gods won't come down, humanity will climb up. The kings have taken that challenge personally. Hammurabi, sharp-eyed and certain of his place in the cosmic order, has just completed his great stele of laws. You run your fingers over its black surface and feel the carved image of Shamash, the sun god, handing the code to the king. It's theatre in stone. The message is clear. Justice flows from heaven. But heaven now has an address, the royal palace. You can almost hear the Anunnaki laughing somewhere, amused at how easily their authority has been franchised. Still, it works. The people believe. They bow not to thunder or lightning anymore, but to law. Civilization has become the new divine. At night, when the air cools and the torches burn low, the priests still chant the names of the old gods. Insil, Inki, Inanna, Ninazag, syllables that once shook mountains now barely ripple the surface of candlelight. You sit at the edge of the temple court and listen. The chants are rhythmic, almost hypnotic, the same cadence that once echoed through Soma's temples 1,000 years earlier. But here, in this later age, they feel like echoes of echoes, hollow, beautiful, but fading. The gods have become ancestors, and the Anunnaki are now stories told to children when the wind howls. Still, the old order hasn't entirely vanished. When a comet streaks across the night sky, The priests declare it a message from the heavens. The gods are restless. They whisper. Offerings increase. Rituals multiply. The people need the illusion of dialogue, the feeling that the universe still picks up the phone when they call. One night, you stand beside the Euphrates and watch the reflection of the stars tremble on its surface. For a moment, the water and sky blur into one endless mirror. You realize that the Anunnaki might never have left at all. They've just changed mediums from bodies to symbols, from lightning to language, from presence to memory. In the palace garden, you overhear a scholar arguing with a priest. The gods gave kingship to men. The priest insists. The scholar shakes his head. No, he says softly. Men gave kingship to gods. The idea is dangerous, even whispered. You can see the tension in their eyes, faith wrestling with logic. The priest clings to certainty, the scholar to doubt. Both, in their own way, are worshipping. You smile faintly. The gods must find it amusing, their greatest creation turning out to be free will. Days pass, then seasons. You travel north through Assyria, where soldiers march beneath banners embroidered with winged figures, half human, half divine. These are not the soft golden beings of old Sumerian hymns. These are warriors, guardians, reflections of a harder age. The Anunnaki have been reforged into symbols of empire. Their faces are stern, their eyes unblinking, their beards carved in perfect curls. You stand before one colossal relief carved into a palace wall. The being's hand holds a pine cone and a bucket, gestures of cleansing, renewal, authority. Its wings stretch wide, each feather precise as a blade. To the people here, these are not myths. They are protectors. You can almost feel the stone pulse beneath your fingertips. At sunset, you find yourself in the shadow of Nineveh's walls, where the last great kings of Mesopotamia have built their libraries. Vast archives of clay tablets, each one a whisper of the past. Among them, you find familiar stories: Enki creating man, Inanna descending to the underworld, Enlil commanding the winds. But there are new ones too, fragments that blend the divine and the human until they're indistinguishable. One tablet speaks of a time when the gods will walk again among men, not as rulers but as reminders. Another says they never truly left, that they hide in the elements, waiting for humanity to remember their names. You close your eyes and imagine the voices of the Anunnaki murmuring through the wind, the rain, the heartbeat of the earth. By night, you camp near the ruins of an older temple swallowed by sand. The stars above are impossibly clear. You trace their patterns and recognize the same constellations carved on tablets thousands of years ago. Orion, Taurus, the Pleiades, all once believed to be celestial palaces of the gods. A soft breeze brushes your face, and for a fleeting moment you think you see movement among the stars, a slow shimmer, like something vast shifting behind the curtain of the sky. It might just be your imagination, but it feels like acknowledgement. The Anunnaki were once kings of both heaven and earth. Now they are stories, constellations, echoes, but somehow that feels right. The power they once wielded has seeped into us, into our art, our laws, our need to build, our refusal to stop asking why. You realize that the old partnership hasn't ended, it's just changed form. Humanity inherited the divine impulse, the same drive to create, to destroy, to start over. You lie back against the cool sand, watching the last embers of the day fade into night. The wind hums low, carrying the faint scent of burning cedar from a distant camp. You close your eyes and think about the long line of civilizations that rose from this soil, each one calling the sky by a different name, each one convinced their gods were unique. Yet beneath it all, the same heartbeat remains, the rhythm of clay, blood, and breath. The Anunnaki may have given us form, but it's humanity that gave their myth eternity. Somewhere far above, the stars flicker, ancient, patient, unblinking. Maybe that's their laughter. Or maybe it's just the night reminding you that no story, no god ever truly disappears. It only changes the way it's remembered. By the time you open your eyes again, the ziggurats are crumbling. The reeds have swallowed the canals, and dust has softened the outlines of everything once sacred. Civilization has shifted north, then west, then east again, and the names of the gods are now relics buried in tablets no one can read. You stand on the ruins of Ur, and the only sound is the wind hissing through broken stone. The Anunnaki have grown tired. Or perhaps it's not them at all. Perhaps it's the people who finally stopped waiting for thunder to speak. The air tastes of sand and sun-baked brick. What was once the center of the world is now a ghost city. The streets are empty except for lizards scurrying between cracked clay walls. The great ziggurat looms like a half-remembered dream, its steps crumbling, its peak eroded into a blunt plateau. Yet even now it commands reverence. When you touch its side, the surface is warm, almost alive. Beneath your hand you imagine the pulse of the thousands who once climbed these same steps, chanting, sweating, believing. Their voices are gone, but the echo lingers, faint but steady, like the final heartbeat of a god too proud to die. You wander through what was once a temple courtyard. Weeds have sprouted between the stones, delicate and persistent. A fragment of inscription catches your eye, a piece of a hymn praising Endel as the one who measures the days. The rest is lost to time. Somewhere, a bird lands on the ruin and lets out a sharp cry. The sound cuts through the silence, startlingly human. You smile. Even nature seems to be practicing resurrection here. Far beyond the ruins, new cities rise. Babylon still burns bright for now, but even that flame is flickering. Empires trade names and crowns, but the bones beneath are the same. Every ruler calls himself chosen, every conquest justified by heaven's decree. The Anunnaki are still invoked, but their forms have changed. In one tablet they are called the Watchers, in another, the Great Ones from the sky. Later they will become angels, jinn, divine messengers, even aliens. The vocabulary shifts, but the yearning behind it stays identical. The need to believe that someone larger than us once cared enough to touch the ground. You sit at the edge of the ruin as the afternoon heat builds. Mirage-like waves shimmer across the desert. For a moment, the horizon seems to move, tall figures of gold and shadow walking through the haze. You blink, and they vanish, but the feeling remains that they were never gone, only hidden in the folds of time. You realize that's how myths survive, not through belief, but through longing. In one surviving story from this age, the Anunnaki grow weary of the noise and foolishness of humankind. They retreat into the sky, not in anger but exhaustion. We have given them all we know, they say, and still they hunger. From the heavens they watch their creation build temples, then cities, then empires, each one claiming to be the chosen people of the old gods. The Anunnaki sigh, realizing they've taught mankind the one thing that can rival immortality: ambition. You can see that lesson written everywhere. Kings still build monuments to themselves. Traders still carve seals with celestial emblems. Priests still argue over the proper way to call down blessings. The divine has become bureaucracy, but the intention is the same, the human heart beating upward, wanting to be remembered. You can't help but wonder if the Anunnaki predicted this, if they smiled knowing that one day their creations would inherit their own obsession with legacy. As dusk falls, the wind grows colder. You walk down a slope toward what used to be a canal. It's dry now, just a ribbon of cracked earth lined with broken pottery. The sun bleeds red behind the horizon, painting everything gold for one last generous moment. The desert hums softly. You feel it in your ribs, the low vibration of everything ending and continuing at once. You lie back in the dust and stare at the stars. They look the same as they did in the beginning, indifferent, eternal, painfully beautiful. Somewhere up there, the Sumerians once said, the Anunnaki still hold court in their shining palaces, but their silence now feels less like absence and more like permission. They've withdrawn, leaving the stage to us. And in their absence, we've learned to fill the silence with our own stories, our own small acts of creation. Maybe that's what they wanted all along, for us to take over the work, to plant, to build, to tell, to dream. You think about Enki shaping the first humans out of clay, whispering life into them. What if that whisper wasn't command, but encouragement? What if it said, "Continue what we started"? The night deepens. The stars wheel slowly across the sky, each one a cold memory. You close your eyes and listen to the wind move through the ruins. It sounds like breathing. Somewhere in that rhythm you think you hear laughter. Soft, tired, ancient. Maybe the gods never vanished. Maybe they just decided to rest, satisfied that their creation could handle the darkness without them. You breathe in the desert air, heavy with heat and history, and let the sound of the wind blur into your heartbeat. For the first time in this long story, you feel something like peace. Not the kind that comes from prayer or revelation, but the kind that comes when you finally stop asking for answers. The temple behind you crumbles a little more, and the dust swirls upward, glowing faintly in the starlight. You imagine the particles rising higher and higher, joining the night sky like sparks of forgotten names. The gods are gone. The gods are everywhere. The distinction you realize doesn't matter anymore. You wake beneath a different sun, softer, filtered through the smoke of a new empire. Centuries have passed. Babylon is a memory now, its ziggurats reclaimed by silence and wind. Yet the Anunnaki have refused to die, outliving even the languages that first named them. They've become wanderers in humanity's imagination, traveling through cultures the way rivers travel through land, invisible beneath the surface, but always shaping it. You walk through Egypt, where the Nile glitters like an uncoiled serpent, and the temples rise sharp as thought. The faces carved into these walls are different, but something about the eyes feels familiar. The old Sumerian grace is here, refined, translated. The gods of the floodplain have put on new masks. In the shadows of Luxor you find inscriptions of deities stepping out of boats that glide across the heavens, tall figures with wings or crowns of stars, descending to teach humanity the order of the world. They speak of balance, truth, cosmic harmony. You can almost hear Enlil and Enki debating again, their old quarrel reborn in another tongue. The priests here don't call them Anunnaki anymore, but the essence is identical. Celestial teachers, bearers of divine law, the architects of civilization. Every culture keeps telling the same story because every culture inherits the same hunger, the need to believe that knowledge came from above, not from within. As you move west along the Mediterranean, you hear new versions of their names. In Greece, they become Titans and Olympians, the elder gods cast down by their own creations. In the hills of Anatolia, they are storm lords, dragon slayers, skyborn kings. In Persia, they become the Amesha Spenters, divine emanations of wisdom and fire. Each translation sheds detail but preserves the feeling, the awe of something greater touching the soil, the fear that it might never return. It's like watching a memory being told through 100 different mouths, each one distorting it a little, yet keeping its rhythm intact. You pause in a dusty market somewhere between empires and listen to a storyteller spin a tale for a crowd of children. He calls them the Shining Ones, beings who descended from the heavens long ago to teach men the secrets of cultivation, metal, and writing. When they finished their work, he says, eyes wide, they return to the stars, but they promise to watch. The children gasp. One of them looks up at the sky, squinting, perhaps hoping to spot a glimmer of movement. You smile faintly. Thousands of years have passed, and the story still works. It still makes people look up. You travel farther east, through deserts and mountains, until you reach the lands that will become India. There you find hymns sung in a different language, but with the same pulse. They speak of gods descending in blazing chariots, wielding thunder and light, gifting mankind the knowledge of fire. You remember the first Sumerian tablets describing the Anunnaki's ships of flame, the chariots of the gods, and you feel a shiver. Myth is a contagion that never truly dies. It mutates, hides, and waits. At night, under a canopy of stars, you lie by a fire and realize how far the Anunnaki have traveled without moving. They are everywhere, in pyramids and cathedrals, in scrolls and psalms, in the geometry of the heavens. Each civilization finds them under a different name, and each time they appear, they remind us that we are descendants of something both miraculous and tragic, beings who looked at mud and saw potential, who loved their creation enough to let it fall. Centuries blur into millennia. You drift like smoke through time. The world grows noisier. Empires rise and burn, prophets speak, philosophies bloom. The gods shrink from colossal forms into abstractions, then into words, then into silence. But every now and then a trace of them flickers. A carved relief, a phrase in a forgotten text, a winged figure watching from the corner of an ancient chapel. The scholars call it coincidence. You know better. The Anunnaki never left. They just became the background radiation of belief. You stand now in a dim library somewhere in the 21st century. The walls hum faintly with the sound of air conditioning, but the tablets here are digital, glowing softly in the dark. Someone has uploaded translations of Sumerian hymns, their words preserved in perfect pixels. You scroll through lines written 5,000 years ago and realize they still breathe. "We are the ones who came from the heavens," one line reads. "We shaped and we departed, but our shadow remains." You stare at the screen, feeling that familiar twinge of wonder and unease. The same mix that made the Sumerians kneel under the stars still makes you reach for your phone in the dark, searching for patterns in the infinite. Outside, the rain begins. Soft, steady, ancient. You can hear it against the glass. The same rain that once drowned the world, now tamed into weather. You imagine Enki watching from somewhere, amused, maybe even proud. Humanity has mastered the flood at last. We dam it, measure it, pipe it through cities. We've become the gods we once begged for mercy. But in doing so, we've inherited their fatigue too. The same weariness that drove the Anunnaki to retreat pulses faintly beneath every invention, every skyscraper and satellite, the quiet exhaustion of creators who can't stop creating. You walk outside into the wet night. Neon lights ripple on the pavement, reflecting like modern constellations. Somewhere overhead, planes cross paths like the old chariots of heaven. You tilt your head back and wonder how much of this, the buildings, the wires, the endless hum, is tribute and how much is repetition. The air smells faintly of ozone, the same scent that once filled the temples of Sumer before a storm. For a moment you think you hear that low hum again. Not thunder, but something mechanical and endless. You smile. If the Anunnaki could see this world, they'd recognize it immediately, not as evolution, but as inheritance. You close your eyes, feeling the cool rain on your skin, the electricity humming through every light around you. The gods once ruled the skies, then the temples, then the imagination. Now they rule quietly from within us. They are the spark in every circuit, the whisper in every story, the reason we still look up and wonder who's watching. Maybe they never wanted to be worshipped at all. Maybe they only wanted to be remembered. And we did. We remembered them so hard that we became them. It's night again. Not the ancient night of torchlight and reed smoke, but the electric one, the hum of cities stretching like constellations across the earth. The Anunnaki's story has traveled so far that it no longer knows its own face. It's become everything. Religion, science fiction, conspiracy, bedtime myth. You walk down a quiet street where the rain has turned the asphalt to glass, and each puddle reflects a dozen stars. Above you, a plane blinks red and white as it crosses the clouds. 1,000 years ago, someone might have fallen to their knees, thinking the gods were returning. Now people scroll past it on their phones. Progress has replaced awe, and yet the longing remains. Inside a cafe, you sit beside a flickering screen where a documentary plays in muted captions, Ancient Aliens and the Lost Gods of Sumer. The narrator's voice is tinny. The theory's wild that the Anunnaki were astronauts, that gold mines in Africa prove their presence, that they genetically engineered humanity for servitude. You sip your drink and smile faintly. It's not the absurdity that moves you. It's the persistence. Thousands of years later, the same hunger to connect dots, to explain why the world feels designed, still burns in us. We can't leave the gods alone. We keep resurrecting them under new disguises. Visitors, scientists, ancient astronauts. The more rational we become, the more we crave the irrational. It's as if disbelief itself is just another kind of prayer. You wander home through the drizzle, and your footsteps echo against the wet concrete. Somewhere, a streetlight flickers, humming faintly like the sound of a distant engine. You stop beneath it and tilt your head to the sky. Between the buildings, a sliver of the moon hangs, pale and indifferent. For a moment, the city disappears, and you can almost see the ancient plain again. The twin rivers gleaming under starlight, the ziggurats rising like promises, the priests chanting their impossible names. The gods were never really beings, you realize. They were our reflection in the dark water, an image of what we hoped to become. And we did. We became the creators, the engineers of life and machine, the weavers of our own destinies. We built towers taller than ziggurats, harnessed lightning, even learned to manipulate the same clay, DNA, that Enki supposedly shaped in his hands. Every invention, every experiment, every city we raise is a reenactment of the first act of creation. But it's also a quiet echo of regret, because creation always comes with loneliness. The Anunnaki must have felt it too, that hollow ache after building something magnificent, realizing it now breathes without you. You walk farther, into a park where the lamps cast halos through the mist. A statue stands by the path, an angel, wings folded, eyes cast down. It's smooth and cold beneath your hand, but for an instant the form feels familiar. Broad shoulders, perfect symmetry, the same blend of strength and melancholy carved into the oldest depictions of the Anunnaki. You wonder how many of these statues we've built through the ages, how many iterations of the same divine silhouette. The feathers change, the materials change, but the posture never does, always watching, always leaving. Somewhere behind you, a bus engine rumbles. The sound drifts across the park, low and mechanical, and it reminds you of those ancient descriptions, the chariots of the gods, machines of fire that roared across the sky. You think of how easily ancient eyes could mistake sound for divinity, and then you realize, maybe that's what faith always was. Not certainty, but misinterpretation made sacred. We hear thunder and call it language, see lightning and call it judgment, feel wonder and call it proof. Every generation invents its own way of misunderstanding the infinite. You reach the top of a small hill where the city spreads beneath you, glittering like molten metal. The rain has stopped, but the air still smells of ozone, that sharp, metallic scent that makes you think of creation, of storm, of energy gathering before a birth. You close your eyes and listen. The hum of transformers, the hiss of distant tires, the pulse of electricity, it all blends into something ancient and familiar. This is our new ziggurat, our tower of light and noise and ambition. The gods may have abandoned the old temples, but they've found new ones in our circuits, our data, our endless transmission of meaning. We speak to the heavens now through satellites instead of prayers. We've built a cosmos that finally talks back, and still the questions remain the same. What were the Anunnaki? Really? Visitors? Symbols? A story we made to explain the ache in our chest every time we look at the stars? It doesn't matter. What matters is that the story endures. The names change. Enlil, Enki, Yahweh, Zeus, Allah, science. But the rhythm is identical. The sky calls. We answer. We fall silent, and it calls again. You breathe in deeply. The air feels heavy, like the moments before a storm. Maybe that's the gods stirring again, or maybe it's just the city's heartbeat syncing with your own. Somewhere far above, among the satellites and dust and frozen debris of human progress, the stars keep their patient vigil. They've seen this story before. the rise, the worship, the forgetting, the rediscovery, and they'll see it again. You start walking home. The streets are empty now, slick with rain, reflecting neon halos that look almost divine. Every puddle feels like a small mirror of creation, shallow but infinite if you stare long enough. You think of the Sumerians, of their hands pressing reeds into wet clay, trying to preserve what they could never fully understand. You think of the priests of Uruk, the kings of Akkad, the dreamers of Babylon. Every one of them is still here, breathing through you. You're their tablet now, their ziggurat, their vessel. You carry the same question they did: who made us and why? There's no answer, of course. There never was, but there's comfort in the asking. You reach your door, rain dripping from your hair, and pause to look up one last time. The sky is quiet. No gods descend. No thunder speaks. No divine fire cuts the dark. Just the steady glow of a million windows, each one a small human sun, and somehow that feels enough. Because in the end, the Anunnaki never disappeared. They became the idea of wonder itself, the eternal reminder that we are the children of mystery, still building, still believing, still gazing upward through the dust and light, hoping to meet the eyes that once gazed back. You close your eyes and breathe. Somewhere in the distance, thunder murmurs like a tired god clearing his throat. The sound fades into rain, then into silence, and then into sleep. The night drifts, and the story softens. The rain becomes a whisper, the air a steady weight pressing gently on your eyelids. The world is quiet now. All the ziggurats and cities folded into shadow, all the rivers turned to memory. You can still feel them, though, the pulse of those ancient builders, the heartbeat of the gods that made and left us. They move in the background of everything, in the hum of the wires, the rhythm of the rain, the small, repeating miracle of breath. You imagine the old temples again, now empty and silver under the moon, their steps half buried but still waiting. The wind moves through them like a voice too soft to translate. Maybe it's a goodbye, or maybe it's just the sound of eternity exhaling. Somewhere between those breaths you realize that history never really ends. It just lies down beside you, resting its heavy head on your shoulder until the next telling. So you let your thoughts dissolve. The gods are far away now, or perhaps closer than they've ever been. Not in the sky, but in the quiet rhythm of your own chest. The Anunnaki fade into sleep, and you follow them. The rivers, the stars, the clay, all blending into the same slow dream of creation repeating itself forever. The lights dim, the hum steadies, and the last thing you hear is your own breath sinking with the world's. Like a candle going out,